Okay. Here's the deal. Can you guys keep a secret? Just between you and me, and like hopefully my bosses aren't watching. I didn't work today. I kind of blew today off from all the stuff I really totally should be doing, and I got sucked into making some music. And well, there's a backstory to it, so maybe I should explain real quick. It all started back during one of our live streams. I think it was the Combinator live stream. And well, Mattias was showing us something, and this happened.
There we go.
Yeah, so save that, and maybe we'll even throw this Reason file out. People can let's have just a spontaneous remix, little fun with this.
Yeah, go for it.
Anybody who wants to mess with this or add to it, you know, let's hear someone top line this or something. I'll put this out there. If even just one person takes this song and develops it further, I'll do something too, and we can compare notes and see what we did with this little idea that Mattias put together for us as a starting point. And so I made that claim. I was jubilant in the moment. I liked what Mattias had done. I thought, oh, I could hear all these ideas coming of what I wanted to do with it. And then I thought, yeah, you know what? I'll sort of encourage by way of example, and I'll say, if any of you do any kind of development and remix on this, I'll do one too, and we can compare. But then, like, you know, life comes at you, and I got other videos you've been seeing. I've been making other videos, and those have been kind of at the forefront of my mind, and I've been working on other music. And it wasn't long before one of the Reason community members, Holosounds, did one and reached out to us. A few people have done them now, but he reached out to us first and shared with us what he had done, and it was cool. And I was like, when I heard it, I was like, hey, this is cool. That was my first thought. My second thought was, I promised that even if one person does it, I'll do one too. And I was like, it means I got to do one, and I got all this stuff going on. So I was sort of procrastinating on it. And then I put out another video, and he commented in the video. He said, how are you getting along with your Combinator remix? And so I thought, oh, yes, I still have to do that, and I still want to do it, and I definitely don't want to let him down or anyone else down with the promise that I made, which was if anyone does it, I'll do it too. So anyway, flash forward to today. I sit down, I've got a full plate of stuff that I need to get done, and that comment jumps into my head again. I was like, oh yeah, I really do need to do that. Well, maybe what I'll do is I'll take just half an hour before I get to my other workload. I'll take half an hour and just play around to kind of get some remix ideas started. And then I'll come back to it and do it later. Maybe I'll do it on my weekend or in the evenings or something like that. Maybe I'll just, you know, I'll fit it in somewhere in my schedule so that I can keep my promise and do a remix. 5 hours later, I made a whole remix. And I thought I should share it with everybody. And I figured while I'm doing that, maybe I'll just take the opportunity to sort of walk people through what it is I did with it, rather than just sort of post it as audio. And so I thought I'd make this video. And so the idea is I literally just finished the last mix tweaks, and I just turned on my camera and I'm just recording this. So, you know, most of my videos, if you've seen them, there's a lot of production and thought and writing and stuff that goes into them, outlining what I'm going to say. This one, not so much. This is more like a live stream to tape. So I'm just going to play what I've done, and then we'll just sort of walk through it. And I've done so many, like a million different little decisions, I don't actually remember all of what I did. So I'm going to be surprising myself. I'm going to go, oh yeah, that's what I did 3 hours ago. So anyway, this is, let's take a look at the original to reacquaint ourselves. This is the thing that Mattias made in the moment during our live stream. Okay, and there's basically three elements to that. There's this bass part, then there's this drum part, and then there's this other drum part which he did sort of finger drumming on his keyboard. So that's what we started with. And I guess the first thing I'll do is I'll just play the track that I made based on that I started with and then developed from to arrive at now the track that I have. And I'll play it in its entirety. We're just going to hang out for, it's 3 minutes long. So I'll play the whole thing. So anyway, here it is. This is my remix of Mattias's Combinator Livestream idea.
What you wanna see or you wanna dance to? I don't know anyone who dance like you. Falling for you, bum bada bum bada bum, bum bada bum bada bum. What you wanna see or you wanna dance to? I don't know anyone who dance like you. Falling for you, bum bada bum bada bum bada bum bada bum. Bum bada bum bada bum bada bum bada bum.
All right, there you go. So that's what I did. And I'm in that stage. I'm sure a lot of you know that sort of post-creation stage when you're happy with something you've done. I'm like, hey, that turned out really much better than I might have thought it would have when I was about 5 minutes into it. But let's take a look at sort of how this is going. So you probably picked up on a couple of things. Maybe the first thing to pick up on most is that the drums, which are here, that's unchanged. I just took them straight from Mattias's file. I'm a sucker really for those kind of punchy backbeat, fat snare and punchy kick that just that, like, there's a lot of times where that is exactly all you need. That said, I did add a hi-hat here for the sake of development, and we'll get into that in a second. But let's actually jump over and look at the bass. So what did I do for the bass? Well, the bass is actually a part of the remix element. So I took Mattias's thing, and I arrived at this. So how did I do that? Well, I did it by, you can actually see the remnants of what I did. First thing I did is I just right-clicked on Mattias's bass, and I chose bounce in place, and I rendered it to audio. Then as a two-step process, I right-clicked it again, and I chose bounce clips to new samples. And once I had it as a new sample, I brought it into Mimic. And, you know, when I make these videos, the stuff I say in the videos, I'm not lying. You'll see a lot of Mimic in this. It really, you know, if you had looked at a project of mine 4 months ago, you would see 0 samplers, maybe 1 sampler, and I would pat myself on the back for using that sampler. But you'll see there's a lot of Mimic in this. Even for simple things that I might have gone to a drum machine for in the past, I just throw it into Mimic because it does afford me a couple extra creative opportunities. But so here's what I did. This is Mattias's bass sample. In fact, I got to remember my quick keys here. If I hit, is it shift and click? No. Oh, well, we can't. We got other effects too. It's option. I think that was what I clicked. Yeah. Okay. I'll do that in a second here. Let me actually turn off all the effects that make this happen. Set all off. Okay. Let's try it again. See what we get. Yep. Okay. There's a bunch going on here. So maybe it's not even going to be easy for me to play the original sound, but it's the bounced file. It's, you know, it's this. But just not the drums, just the bass part. But what I did is I brought it in and I went into slice mode. And that's all I did. I didn't tweak the slices. I just accepted the transient slices as they were determined by Mimic. And then I threw a drum sequencer on top of it. And I started playing around, just pure, you know, random experimentation. And I shifted some notes. By shifting the notes here in drum sequencer, I'm actually triggering different slices. So I don't even know what G1 and A2 and D2 are. I just did this by ear. I plopped in a couple of notes. This one you can see here. Whoops. I put a triplet there. And a couple other things like this top row. You can actually see here that I used the pendulum direction. So this pattern here is going to go forward, and then it's going to go backward, and then forward and backward. So it's going to be a little different every other time than the other ones, which are all just going forward. But so I programmed in this, and then down in Mimic, let's see if I can, is there a way that I can very quickly make this reset? I'm going to regret doing all these. Let me see. This should get us pretty close. Yeah. So that's drum sequencer just playing Mattias's sample. Now let me see if I can get all that back. And then I'll talk about what all I'm doing here. I'm just undoing here. Okay. So what I did then is, the first thing I did is I actually changed the release time so that you heard that those samples were actually pretty staccato. You know, they were cutting off really quick. So I increased the release time so that they kind of have a little bit of a decay to them. But I also increased the attack time so that it actually is a little bit softer on the attack. It's not quite so bow, bow, bow. It's more wow, wow, wow. You know, not quite of wobbly, but has a little bit of a soft attack to it. I sped it down to a really slow speed, so it gets a little bit more of a kind of stretched, almost, dare I say, almost comb-filtered sound, but not quite. But it's got a little bit of a kind of stretched, aliased kind of quality to it. I'm using the stretch type of melody. I turned off preserved transients because I didn't want that attack to be preserved. I actually wanted to kind of let it smear itself a little bit. And then I did just a hard 6 semitone transposition. I was just kind of moving quick and doing this by ear. I threw on a filter. I added a bitrate noise effect here, and I just dialed that up a little bit, and I rolled off a little bit of the high end on it. And what you end up with then is, I think this should play okay. So that's kind of the basis for the bass part. And then I just started putting effects on it. So I put a chorus on it. It sounds like this. and I put a distortion on it. You know, it's funny, having done recent videos about mimic and distortion and even pedal tones, all that stuff was actually coming up during this remix, and I couldn't tell if I was doing all that stuff because I just made videos about it, or if I had just made videos about it because I do that stuff all the time. I don't know what the chicken and egg is there. But anyway, I added a distortion. We end up with this. Now it's starting to sound more like it does in the real song. I'm using the warp algorithm here in Scream 4. Then I went into Alligator, and Alligator is one that I don't use very much, but I should, because it's kind of like synchronous in that it does a lot of different things, and you can kind of just make it sound cool, you know, in a set it and forget it kind of way. So I actually loaded this preset here called Formant-esque, and it's a combination of the filters and the drive control, and you can see some other effects here are dialed up, and it's moving through these LEDs, show you that it's going to move through the different effects chains built in here in this rhythm. So if I turn it on, it does this to the sound. So, and then I brought in the last thing, which is asynchronous. And what I actually am doing with asynchronous is when I started to develop this more, there was a couple of those notes that poked out, were just a little bit louder than I wanted them to be. And so I actually drew in, basically, you can see here, this is assigned to the level control. And it's effectively just like automation, but it's like one bar of automation to turn down the parts I want to turn down. And it's just going to loop over and over again. So I'll show you here. So if I turn this off, you'll hear that like second beat's gonna be too loud. Oh, wait a second. We're getting the next part coming in already. So I turned it down so it goes like this. So that is what I ended up with. This bass, I don't think I ended up actually using, oh, excuse me, this delay. I didn't actually end up using this delay. So that is the remixed bass part from which I then built. And then from there, I loaded this bass. It's funny, this was kind of a mistake to arrive at this because I was trying to put drums on. It was before I had decided to just go with Mattias's drums, and I was trying to find this one particular drum set from a Reason Plus sound pack, and I went over to the Reason Plus sound packs, and what did I go to? I can't even remember now what I arrived at. It was I was trying to find modern disco pop. That's the one I was looking for, and I ended up at, what is the name of the one? The 80s pop Reason pack. That was the one that I ended up in by mistake, thinking that's where the sound I was looking for was. And it wasn't there, but I ended up dragging in Reezy bass instead. And I just thought it was a nice bass sound. It sounds like this. Actually, it sounds like this. There you go. So it's just a, nice, soft, sort of sawtoothy type bass. And I added a distortion to this just to give it a little extra, some more overtones, some of the higher overtones. And the reason I did that is because I wanted it to stand out a little more in the mix. And I can show you if I take the solo off and I play the two parts together. You hear it? I just wanted to poke out a little more. If I turn that off, you'll hear it just a little more lost, I think. It's there, but it's a little more hidden, and that becomes even more true when the drums come in, and when other stuff comes in, it would really, really get lost. So I put that distortion on, and that gave me the bass. And then from there, I bring in, like I said, I bring in the drums. Oh yeah, okay. So I bring in the drums that are just straight ahead Mattias's drums, no changes whatsoever. Then I add the hi-hat. Okay. And from there, it was time for me to bring something in. The timing maybe not exactly what I would do if I kept developing this, but I did add a little bit of a structure here. So I start with, I think 4 bars of just the original bass, then 4 bars with that added Reese bass underneath it, and then 4 bars of drums, which is split between just kick and snare for 2, and then I bring in the hi-hat for 2. So here's the structure. Bass. Here comes the drums. Hi-hat. And it was time for something more to happen here. And, you know, when you're doing a remix, you can really build it out real slow, or you can kind of get right to the meat of it. And I kind of ended up getting to a little quicker development instead of adding more percussion layers or other synth textures or anything like that. I brought up a piano. And actually what I did is I went to process pianos. I went to process pianos because I don't go to it first much. I go to Radical Piano. Radical Piano is my jam. And for this one, I just thought, you know, I'm going to zag instead of zig. So I went to process pianos instead. And I flipped through a couple of presets, and I landed on Waldorf Ballad here. Let me see if I can... Is that selected? Yeah. So I landed on Waldorf Ballad, and it was this like big dramatic sound that was... partially it's because of my keyboard. My little keyboard on my desk here, I've got this Arturia Mini Lab sitting on my desk, and its velocity curve is a little bit, I guess, excitable. I tend to max out the velocity in ways that I wouldn't when I'm hitting the keys behind me here. So I haven't gone in and tweaked the velocity curve and customized it to my fingers yet. And so in this case, that turned out to be a good thing, because I ended up just by playing some simple chords, I got these big like... and so you can see, I just using my ear, I figured out I was in the key with all that transposition I'd done of Mattias's bass and stuff. I ended up in the key of G flat minor. So I messed around with notes. Let me see what I found. What were the notes I went into? Let me just unmute the original MIDI here. So I found these chords. And what I did is, rather than, I could have just recorded my part. Let me find that. Oh, that's that. And there we go. Those are the 3 notes. I could have just gone in and recorded a part and played it, you know. But I decided to actually, since it's part of the nature of the remix is that it's a sort of sample-based medium. And so I did the same thing that I did with the bass. I bounced it in place, and I ended up with this audio sample. And all I did was I just played the 3 chords. I didn't play them in any particular phrasing. And it's just literally chord 1, chord 2, chord 3. And I took those, so I bounced it in place. Then I did the same thing. I moved that into a mimic. And here it is. And what I did on the mimic here is I put it in slice mode. And so now the chords on the mimic are, where's a C1? There you go. C1, C sharp 1, and D1. I did some similar things here. I slowed it down to make it sound a little more kind of granularized. I made it the advanced stretch algorithm. This time I kept on preserved transients because I wanted to have that strong attack. I added a comb filter here, which I'll show you. it's sort of functioning kind of like a distortion in a way. If I turn it off for a second, wait, which one was that? Comb minus. Okay. If I turn this off, I'm gonna turn the noise off too, so you can hear. If I turn comb minus on again, can you hear that? Hopefully you can hear that. That's just a piano, straight up piano. And then with the comb minus on, there's a little extra. If I turn up the resonance, you'll probably hear more. There, that. It's that, but in a more tasteful sense. Here, I'm going to turn it back down now. Now can you hear that element in the piano? So it just gives it a little bit of kind of like buzz and bite hidden inside that piano. And like I said, let me undo so I can get back to whatever my mix setting was there. There we go. And turn comb minus on. Okay, so then I added a little bit of noise here. I did a similar thing where I added a little bit of release so it doesn't just cut off right away when I lift up my finger. And then that's it for Mimic. And then I added a reverb just to give it a little more, so I had a little bit of space to it. And then I recorded this part. And the part is basically those chords, but I'm playing it a little bit differently each time. Look at that, it's a wrong note. Let's pull that out. So you can see the variations are just a little bit different each time. That wasn't meant, it wasn't like a divine plan that I really had. It was that I was recording the part and I kind of did a few takes and I figured I would just take my favorite one. And then after I laid it down alongside the bass and the drums, I ended up actually thinking it kind of felt nice to have it just subtly change each time. So it sounds like this. So that one's pretty sparse. Then it's a busy one. Then it sort of goes Goldilocks sparse. It's half busy, half sparse. And then I think it's back to the busy one. But I'm going to pause here for a second. So after I had done it 4 times, it was time for new things to happen. And so the new things that happened, well, here's what I'll do. I'll show it to you the way it actually happened, not the way it happens in the mix now. So I decided I was going to kind of go back to square one really with just the bass, but I didn't want to just have the bass. So I thought I'd come up with another part. And for that other part, I actually went back into the original bass part. This, if you hear through the effects, you're going to hear that's Mattias' original sample. And I found this little note. And I was like, well, that's a synth note. So why don't I make an instrument out of just that note? So I set my start and end markers to just that note. I went with an advanced stretch so that when I move around to different pitches, because you can see I'm in pitch mode here. When I move around to different pitches, it won't speed up this note. It'll always keep the duration of that note. I added a little bandpass filter. That might be all I did. Yeah, it looks like that's just about all I did here. Everything else looks pretty much the same. So, and then I ended up adding effects, but I added those after the fact. Let me see if I can. I'll play just the part I came up with. It's a little like melody part. So it sounds like a synth because it is a synth, but there's a big difference because it's a sample, so it's actually chopped audio and it sounds off. It doesn't sound like just a natural synthesizer the way that it would have its sort of attack, decay, sustain, release envelope on every single note the same way every time you play it. It's just a little bit uncanny valley to the ear, and that's a cool thing because it just has a little more intrigue than being a straight up synthesizer. So when you put that up against the original bass part, Mattias's slice mode chopped bass part, they work together in a nice way. It sounds like this. And this was a practice in restraint here because I decided to just leave it as those two things, that bass and that melody part together and nothing else, not to throw more stuff at this. We're trying to contract down into sort of a breakdown, so I don't actually want to make it too busy. So we went from this and then I'm going to come down to this. So here's how it worked. But in order to help that transition a little bit, because the way it happens right now is the sound's going and then it just kind of like stops or just starts doing less, which, we can do something cooler. So what I did is I added two transition elements. I added this vocal sweep. I think this is a Vengeance sample. I had a few Vengeance sound packs that I use now and again, and I think that's where this comes from. And so you see, that helps. That what I'm doing is I'm signaling the listener. I'm using that vocal sweep to sort of go, something's coming, get ready. And it's just a little bit of it's an oral cue. And then to make that something's coming even more pronounced, I actually put in a drum fill as well. And I just let this go. I let it go 2 full times through the melody. Was it 4 times maybe? No, two full times through the melody. Because I don't know, it felt nice, and I just kind of wanted to let the ears kind of swim in the pond there of those two parts, the way they play off each other and the sounds. Another thing I brought in, I'll mention it now rather than later. Something I brought in later in the production was I actually added this layer. I'm going to play it again. And that layer, if I solo it, it's rain. Hear it? So I take the low pass off, it's just going to sound exactly like rain. But I filter it down, so it just becomes this noise. And it's something that, like, you don't... I mean, now that I've pointed it out, you hear it. But when you listen to it the first time, you probably didn't notice it necessarily. But if I took it away, it feels more empty. I'll show you what I mean. Hear it in there? This is something that is in the era of analog recording, a lot of times stuff like this would be tape hiss, or electrical ground hum, like a lot of stuff that was people tried desperately to get rid of, but often ended up on recordings 30 and 40 years ago. In the digital era, those don't exist anymore. And sometimes it's nice to put some of that kind of gunk back in, because here, if I mute it, I'll put it in, I'll play a little bit and then I'll mute it, and you'll see that it's fine, but it's just there's like a little something empty. It feels a little sterile when I take it away. And I carried that through the rest of the track, actually. And then, after I'd done that a full 2 times, it was time for me to bring in a hook, really, because so far the closest thing I have to a hook is this. But even that, like, you're not going to sing that. So what I did is I jumped over to Splice, and I found this vocal sample.
Bum bada bum bada bum. What you wanna see or you wanna dance to? I don't know anyone who dance like you.
I found the part I liked, which was kind of the first half, really, and I put it over top of. Let me just mute another little transition thing. I put it over top of my vibe here, and it ends up doing this for us.
What you wanna see or you wanna dance to? I don't know anyone who dance like you. Falling for you, bum bada bum bada bum.
And you see what I did is I took the first bum bada dum bada dum, and I just put it there at the end, so it's sort of a bookend, so it makes this phrase.
Bada bum bada bum. What you wanna see or you wanna dance to? I don't know anyone who dance like you. Falling for you, bum bada bum bada bum.
And what happens now, you've heard that twice, and it's, when I listen to that vocal phrase, that's the part that sticks out of me. That is the hook, as it were. It's the thing that's hooked me. Bum ba da dum ba da dum. And so I played with it more. You'll hear I repeat the same phrase, but at the end I double down literally and repeat it and then repeat it again. So I get this.
Bum bada bum bada bum. What you wanna see or you wanna dance to? I don't know anyone who dance like you. Falling for you, bum bada bum bada bum bada bum bada bum.
So here it goes. So now I'm doing it 3 times. I'm starting the phrase with it.
Bum bada bum bada bum.
And then at the end of the whole phrase, I do it twice.
Falling for you, bum bada bum bada bum bada bum bada bum.
That's now my hook. That sort of becomes, it's the vocal hook that's going to be the thing from which I build my structure around. Now, when I bring it in here, I've got my breakdown idea kind of just bubbling along here. And at some point, I'm just going to bring in the vocal.
Bum bada bum bada bum. What you wanna see or you wanna dance to? I don't know anyone who dance like you.
But what I did is I actually added this element here. I'll solo it for a second. So it just kind of comes in and goes. But what I'm doing with that is the same way back here that I was using the fill and this vocal sweep to let you know something is coming. I'm letting you know something's coming, so you're not, because if without it, you're kind of swimming in this little vibe. And then after a while, this thing's going to come in that's going to kind of, I don't know, it's going to interrupt. To my sense, this interrupts it. Like it comes in out of nowhere almost. So what I did is I bring in this little sweep beforehand, and that little sweep is just like when divers dive into the water, the reason they hold their hands out is to actually split the surface tension of the water before they go in. And in the same way, I'm like splitting the surface tension of this little sound moment that I've been having for the last 8 bars. It's been kind of nice. I sort of go like, okay, something's coming. I'm gonna be interrupting this, and it just, you'll see. So this is what it does. Bum bada bum bada bum.
you wanna see and you wanna dance to. I don't know anyone who dance like you. Falling for you, bum bada bum bada bum, bum bada bum bada bum. What you wanna see and you wanna dance to. I don't know anyone who dance like you. Falling for you.
And now it was time to bring back in kind of the band, you know, the piano, the drums, all that stuff. So I did that.
For you, bum bada bum bada bum bada bum bada bum.
Now, that's all that stuff is just all the stuff from the original intro. Same exact piano part. You can see here it's the same 4 performances. I just copied it twice. Same bass, that Reese bass that just does this. The only thing that's new is this. I recorded bass guitar and it sounds like this. It's doing a similar thing to the Rain sound in that it's bringing in this low-end weight that isn't necessarily calling attention to itself. You wouldn't ever sing along to this bass part the way you might when you're listening to like a Daft Punk song. It's just adding this low-end presence that you would miss if it were gone. So let me play the section. Now I'm going to turn it off halfway through and you're going to feel, or maybe I'll turn it off now and then I'll bring it in halfway through and you'll sense what it's doing. Hopefully, maybe you're wearing earphones or you're listening on speakers. If you're listening on a laptop right now, don't expect to get the subtleties of really any mix you listen to in a YouTube video. But let's check this out. I'm going to turn it on halfway through. Do you feel that? I'm going to do it the other way around. I'll now turn it off and you'll feel it go away. You feel that just the kind of, it's like the bottom dropped out, literally. The bottom frequencies, you know, even though there's a lot of bass stuff happening, that little really low bass groove just gives it this little extra thing that we don't need earlier on. You know, when we're back at this part, it's fine. But once we're coming out of this section, we've established the hook and we've brought everything back in and it needs to have a little more power. That bass just gives us a little extra weight.
I don't know anyone who dance like you. Falling for you, bum bada bum bada bum bada bum bada bum.
And then from here, I'm just playing around, adding extra vocals. So you'll hear the vocal phrase come back.
Yeah, what you wanna see and you wanna dance to. I don't know anyone who dance like you. Falling for you, bum bada bum bada bum bada bum bada bum. Yeah, what you wanna see and you wanna dance to. I don't know anyone who dance like you. Falling for you, bum bada bum bada bum bada bum bada bum.
And so that's the same hook from the beginning, except if I jump back to this original raw vocal, I grabbed the yeah at the very end of the phrase. So, whoops, here, I'll solo it.
For you like one falling, yeah.
Hear that little yeah?
Falling for you like one falling, yeah.
So I grabbed that yeah, and I filled a gap in the hook here. Without it, it kind of had a weird turnaround. There was like a gap. It finished the bum ba da dum ba da dum ba da dum ba da dum, and then there was like a nothing, and then it repeated. So it was like this.
I don't know anyone who dance like you. Falling for you, bum bada bum bada bum bada bum bada bum. What you wanna see and you wanna dance to.
So I added that yeah, and just to fill the gap, and it works like this.
Falling for you, bum, bada, bum, bada, bum, bada, bum, bada, bum. Yeah, what you wanna see and you wanna dance to. I don't know anyone who dance like you. Falling for you, bum, bada, bum, bada, bum, bada, bum, bada, bum.
And so it's time just to bring in a little more development, and then just classic EDM and remix trick here. I brought back in this thing. So over here.
Bum, bada, bum. Yeah.
When it comes back in, it causes you to go like, oh yeah, that thing. So here, let me show you. Just back up a little bit. And we've got the hook, we've got the piano, we've got the bass all happening. And then we just kick it up that little extra thing with something that your brain goes like, oh yeah, that thing. And it feels nice.
Falling for you, bum, bada, bum, bada, bum, bada, bum, bada, bum. Yeah, what you wanna see and you wanna dance to. I don't know anyone who dance like you. Falling for you, bum, bada, bum, bada, bum, bada, bum, bada, bum. Yeah.
Now, though, there is something different if we listen to, if I solo the this little mimic melody part, if I back up here and play it. That's the way it appears in the first time it comes in the song. Then when it comes back in, it sounds like this. In the first time. Second time. So what is happening? Well, there's a few things happening. First thing that's happening is I run it through another distortion. Coming out of the EQ, it goes to a splitter, and then from the splitter, it goes off two different ways. One goes to a distortion, and the other one goes directly to a mixer channel. And so then I end up here, I've got distortion and mixer, and then I can just basically have both signals and sort of parallel process it. The end result, that's really what matters, doesn't it? The end result is we get just a little extra bite here. Versus. So I'm doing that because it would get lost in the mix otherwise, or I felt it was getting lost in the mix. And rather than turn it up and just bring up kind of the same low mid frequencies that work so well when it's on its own, I wanted to just add some harmonics, some higher end harmonics, kind of excite the frequencies in the higher end. So that's what I did. And in fact, to make it stand out even more, I'm going to unsolo that and go back to this. I actually added just a duplicate track, and I used basic FM pluck from Algorithm because I just wanted just the clickety clack attack part. So those two things together just help us stick out in the rest of the mix here. Let me see if I can, I don't know if I can do this quickly here, but let me just try and I'll mute the FM, basic FM pluck, and then let me go to the rack here and I'll mute the distortion part of the parallel processing. Where's that mixer? Here we go. And so, yeah, okay, so this, see how that's nice and dry and kind of warm sounding? That's the same setting here, but if you listen to it, it's going to get more lost. I'll bring in the distortion here. And here, I'm going to bring in the pluck too now.
Ba-da-bum, 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 ba-da-bum. Yeah. Yeah. Bum, ba-da-bum, 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 ba-da-bum. Yeah.
And the end result is your ear hears it and it goes, oh yeah, it's that thing. Which is what? This thing. It hears it as the same thing, but it's actually poking out in a nice way in the mix here.
Ba-da-bum, ba-da-bum, ba-da-bum. Yeah. Yeah. Bum, ba-da-bum, 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 ba-da-bum. Yeah.
And from there, I just bring the hook back in.
Yeah. Bum, ba-da-bum, 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 ba-da-bum. Yeah. What you wanna see and you wanna dance to. I don't know anyone who dance like you. Falling for you, bum, ba-da-bum, ba-da-bum.
And I'm going to play out to the end of the song. But what I did is, again, the same thing, this, diver diving into the water to let you know something, or to break the surface tension, the way that that's my metaphor, but the way that we're going to kind of give the listener some signals that something is coming. I brought in this patch from the Factory Sound Bank called Mod Wheel Noise, and it sounds like this. And you can see here, the mod wheel is what's causing that pitch to dive. That's happening via mod wheel automation. And then I add in the synchronous to give it just a pulse.
Ba-da-bum, ba-da-bum. Yeah. What you wanna see and you wanna dance to. I don't know anyone who dance like you. Falling for you, bum, ba-da-bum, ba-da-bum.
And then I do it again.
Ba-da-bum. Yeah. What you wanna see and you wanna dance to. I don't know anyone who dance like.
And then the last thing I do is I just mute everything except the bum ba da bum 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 vocal that becomes such a hook for us. I mute everything. I even bypass the effects, and I just end on this very sterile vocal only element. Classic way to end something, kind of feels off in a nice way to kind of just pull everything out. So I'll back it up. We'll play through to the end. You'll hear that automation and just that solo vocal.
Ba-da-bum, 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 ba-da-bum. Yeah. What you wanna see and you wanna dance to. I don't know anyone who dance like you. Falling for you, bum, ba-da-bum, 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 ba-da-bum. Yeah. What you wanna see and you wanna dance to. I don't know anyone who dance like you. Falling for you, bum, ba-da-bum, 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 ba-da-bum.
And that's it. So that's what I ended up doing as my remix of Mattias's track. And you can see, if I jump back for a second, it's wildly different than his. I've developed it in a different direction, even in a different key, and really kind of gone somewhere. But the essence of it is still there. It's not wholly unrecognizable from his bass groove and his drums. And here's mine.
Bum, ba-da-bum, 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 ba-da-bum. Yeah. What you wanna see and you wanna dance to. I don't know anyone who dance like you. Falling for you, bum.
So it's, there is some sort of continuity of thought there, even though I've really kind of departed quite a bit from what was Mattias's thing. But anyway, hopefully that is helpful. Hopefully people get some ideas going. And maybe if you haven't done something with Mattias's idea, head over to our blog, because we have the Reason file, and I think the stems, even if you're not running Reason standalone and you want to get at this and develop it in another way, you totally can get at it with stems as well. So head over to the blog, grab it, do your own. Hopefully you have fun with it. I guess I'll play myself out here with my own remix here. I had a lot of fun doing this today, aside from the fact that I didn't get my actual work day done. I'll deal with that tomorrow. Tomorrow is a new day of productivity, and I can check this off my list. And Hollis Sounds, I want to thank you for, kind of giving me a little bit of a kick there and saying, hey, where's your remix? You said you were going to do one. Well, I did one. I kept my promise. That feels good. I made something I'm happy with. That feels great. And in the process, hopefully I got to share some of my thinking with you guys so you could see the way I approach things. I mean, a lot of this is that hyper creative, throwing things at the wall while you go, and just, kind of creation at the speed of whatever. Speed of light? Not really. Speed of thought. So if I were to ever package this up, maybe I'd try and clean it up, and maybe I'd make other mix decisions. Maybe I would add things. Maybe I would take some stuff away. But right now, I'm happy with the way it ended up. And so hopefully you guys make one too. That's it. That's it for tonight. See ya.